Hi, it's Maryn with GrantsMagic, welcoming you to 3D Thursday, a few minutes each week to stretch our minds and help us think outside the box in our grants work and in our lives as a whole. This is how excited I am that you're here with me today. Now I have a question for you. Have you ever had a perfectly ordinary, everyday experience that suddenly got you thinking about something in a whole new way? Well, it doesn't get much more ordinary than this, a pair of plain old everyday kitchen scissors. But something happened with these scissors a few days ago that made me go, and I thought I'd share it with you and see if that might make you go, too. So I call today's episode, Now You See It, or Do You? Okay. So, what is this? Looks like a blank sheet of paper to you, but allegedly this is what Captain Cook's sailing ship looked like to some of the natives as it drew nearer to the shores of the South Sea island that they inhabited for the first time back in the late 1700s. This is what we would see. This is what the natives saw. Sailing ship, nothing. Sailing ship, nothing. That's right, nothing. Why? Well, I will tell you why. It's a very interesting explanation, even if the story itself isn't true, and nobody's quite sure if it is, but I've heard it several times, and maybe you've heard it as well, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. The reason the natives could not see the ship was because they literally couldn't see the ship. And that's because there was nothing in their entire experience, their entire lifetime on the island, or the lifetimes of generation after generation of ancestors before them, that pre-wired their brain to be able to understand or have a context for knowing what the heck this is. See, it's something that their brains absolutely couldn't make sense of because they had no place to put it. It wasn't like anything else they'd ever seen. There was no way that their brain could process those light waves coming to them from the ocean and make it be like anything they'd ever seen. So the brain simply says, doesn't make sense, doesn't exist, not going to do anything with those light waves. And that's exactly what they saw. Nothing. Now, what's interesting is that other natives, perhaps on another island, perhaps from another culture, would have seen this. Sailing ship, big white seabird. Sailing ship, big white seabird. Why? What's the difference? Because they knew birds. Birds are something that they understood. Birds were something that their brain could make sense of. And if they looked at this and didn't have a clue what it was, their brains get very busy thinking, what is this like? Is this like anything we know? It must be like something. And the thing that they came up with was, it's a big white bird with great big white wings, right? Because why? Not because that's what it actually looked like to them, but it's because that's what their brain could make sense of. You see, the truth is we really only see what our brains let us see. And shockingly, that isn't always what's really there. Seeing is the word we have for the way our brains process the light waves that are constantly bouncing off the objects around us, back to the back of our eyeballs, back again, back and forth. And we have learned over time our brains have learned over time to organize and sort the input from those light waves to create something that makes sense. Now, we start as infants with no context at all for what those light waves are. Babies are just in the moment of the light wave experience. They don't mean anything. They haven't yet begun to coalesce into anything that the baby can differentiate as having any meaning whatsoever. But over time, our developing brains begin to sort and organize and categorize and compare. And by the time we're adults, our brains have literally hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of categories or labels for sorting and organizing and comparing and making sense of all those bouncing light waves. All right? So this is happening all the time. We just don't always realize it. And it doesn't have to be something as big as a sailing ship. Remember these? Back to my story. This is what my pair of scissors looked like to me a few days ago. Let me tell you the story, all right? I was working in my office early in the morning, and something I was doing involved using the scissors. So I had these scissors out. I was using them. It was finished. I set them aside. Turned my attention to something else. Later on in the morning, a fair bit later in the morning, I needed the scissors again, and I looked around for them, and they weren't there. I looked around for them, and they weren't there. I said, that's funny. I just had them here earlier this morning. So I looked in my drawers in case I tucked them in a drawer. Not there. I looked on my shelves. Not there. I looked under piles of paper on my desk, thinking that I might have dumped something on top of them. No sign of them anywhere. So by now I'm getting pretty perplexed. It's like, I just had these scissors here a few minutes ago. Well, it was a couple of hours ago maybe. What the heck happened to them? So I was very intent in my search and wondering what could have happened to those scissors. I decided it was time to refresh my cup of coffee. So I got up and went to my kitchen, reached for the coffee maker, poured myself a new cup of coffee, wandered back into my office, still very perplexed as to where those scissors could have gone. You know, they're orange handled. It's kind of hard to overlook them. And finally, I just gave up. I said, I don't have time for this. They'll turn up somewhere, sometime. I have no clue where. I'm going to have to turn my attention to something else. So I did, and I worked for another 45 minutes or so. Time for another cup of coffee. So I get up, I go into the kitchen. By now, my mind is moving off the fact that the scissors have to be in the office somewhere because I just had them there. And I reached for the coffee pot, and I looked down at my hand, and 3 inches away from my hand, 3 inches away from the coffee pot on the counter, are the scissors, right? As clear as day. Well, that really shocked me and threw me for a loop. Now, this kind of thing does happen from time to time. We've all had experiences like this. Haven't you had an experience like that? It's like, I looked everywhere and it wasn't there. Well, here's the thing. It maybe wasn't in a certain sense, because I had to really work hard to figure out what on earth was going on. I had gotten up while I was still looking for my scissors, very much on my mind. I'd gone into the kitchen. I had pulled the coffee pot off the coffee maker. The scissors had to have been there 3 inches away, unless my theory from the Twilight Zone about the invisible beings who scurry about moving things from one place to another just to have fun with us is actually true, which I kind of doubt. But I hadn't seen them, and I had been looking for them. So I actually did a little bit of research on this to figure out what was going on, and that's where I was reminded of the story about Captain Cook and his ship. What happened? Here's what I came up with. My brain was simply too preoccupied to process the irrational light waves from a physical object, my scissors, that my brain knew was somewhere else in my office. So my brain decided it didn't make sense, and it just ignored those signals. So the sensory input, the light waves, actually never made it through the processing system into the part of my brain that would actually recognize an object there. The brain had decided that those scissors couldn't be there. It wasn't that I didn't notice the scissors, I actually did not see them because my brain had made the decision that those light waves didn't make any sense, those scissors couldn't be there, and so they weren't. Isn't that weird? So what on earth do invisible sailing ships and disappearing scissors have to do with our work in the nonprofit world? Great question. And that's exactly my challenge to you. What is your sailing ship? What is that thing that you're literally blind to? It doesn't exist because there's never been anything like it in your existence. Or what you're seeing is looking like a big white bird because you know and understand what a bird is when it's really a sailing ship. Now this is really challenging, I know, because of course I'm asking you to see what you can't see. I'm asking you to know what you don't know. I'm asking you to imagine what you've never imagined, and we can't do that. We can't jump completely outside of our frame of reference. What we can do is know that we don't know what we can't see. Know that we don't know what we don't know. And know that we can't imagine what we haven't imagined. And keep our eyes from that humble place of knowing. Keep our eyes and our minds open to what might be there. What could be there? What's really there? Whether we can see it right now or not. And what in your life is like my scissors, not what you expect to see or where you expect to see it, so it's invisible to you, just as my scissors were invisible to me, even though you're searching for it And even though it's right there in front of your eyes, what's that for you? What's the possibility, the dream, the vision, the resource, the reality, the connection, the solution, the very thing that will change everything? If only you could get your sorting and organizing brain out of the way and see what's right there in front of you. Post your thoughts and comments below. Let's get this conversation going. Now I have a quick little homework assignment for you for next week. You see that rectangle over there with the 4 circles in the middle of it? What could that be? Take a few minutes to brainstorm as many things as you can think of that this shape could be right now or sometime between now and next Thursday. You might even post your best ideas down below. That could be a lot of fun. Then come back and join me next week for 3D Thursday, and we'll have some fun with possibilities. So I hope you found something today to astonish and delight you and make you say, Till next week, this is Maryn with GrantsMagic, wishing you astonishment and delight in everything you do.